I've been in the podcast game for nearly 3 years. That's 3 years of constantly developing new segments, attractions, gimmicks. You know, one of those big concepts that I've had on my mind for a very long time. It's not just to involve the pros inside of the business, but to bring in the elite of the elite, the absolute brightest minds talking about all aspects of what makes professional wrestling so great. So now with Hot Tag WrestleCast, I get to do exactly that. And the best part about this, the cherry on top of this magnificent ice cream sundae that I have here on our debut episode, I have is our first marquee guest. He's the name at the very top of my wish list when I started putting this thing together. Ladies and gentlemen, pro wrestling fanatics, you're going to recognize him from NXT, Ring of Honor, Impact Wrestling, and one of the most decorated stars in the history of Ohio Valley Wrestling. He's just shy of 2 incredible decades inside of the business, from the parking lot to the office to the gym to the locker room to the ring. He's done it all inside of the business. He is the psychedelic superstar, Chris Silvio. Sir, welcome to the Hot Tag WrestleCast.
Oh, I got that hot tag. I'm coming in to blow the big comeback. Here comes the punch. Here comes the block punch. Another punch. Here comes a drop kick. Time for a little moonsault. I'm doing fantastic, man. That was a hell of an intro you gave me. You made me sound way more over than I actually am. But no, man, I'm happy to be here. I love wrestling. I love talking wrestling. And yeah, congrats on the launch of the new podcast, man. What you told me about it, it sounds like it's going to be a hell of a show. So I can't wait to see what you do with it.
Well, Mr. Silvio, I want to thank you. It's an honor to have you on with us. You know, as I mentioned, nearly 2 incredible decades in the business. You broke in arguably during the greatest boom period that we've ever witnessed. Of course, I'm talking about the Attitude Era. You continue to grow as wrestling enters the Ruthless Aggression Era. You know, coming out of the gate here, can you talk about those early inspirations that you had and that drive? You know, what pushed you towards, chasing this dream inside of professional wrestling?
Yeah, dude, it's really funny you asked that. I was just talking to our colleague MSG, Matt Schaffer, earlier, and he asked about something similar. Yeah, you said I came along during the boom period. I also happened to come along during the most violent period in American wrestling history. So that was like a lot of my early career. And, that's probably a good reason as to why, I'm not wrestling indefinitely now as of 2019. But, man, it's a crazy story, and I never really get to give him much credit. There's this guy named Warren Belfield. He was good friends with my older brother. My older brother has nothing to do with wrestling. And they were friends, I don't know, since like middle school probably. I had wrestling mats in my garage because I was a high school wrestler and I would practice in the afternoons. I had, like the school wrestling mats. And he came over one day, this guy Warren, and he's like, "Hey, can I borrow your wrestling mat?" Like, can I swear on this or is this PG?
Go ahead, man. We're no holds barred here.
Great. Like, who the fuck shows up to your house and asks to borrow a wrestling mat? Like, that's probably the first time that question's ever been asked. So I'm like, what are you doing? Well, me and my friends are doing a backyard wrestling show. All I heard was wrestling. And these guys are way older than me. They were probably 6, 7 years old. I was 6, 7 years older than me, and I was probably 16 years old at the time. And I said, hell yeah, you can borrow my wrestling mats, but you got to put me on the show. So I met up with these college-age dudes. A couple had already graduated, and they started as a joke. They would do this thing at parties where they would wear lucha masks and wrestle each other. That morphed into an actual backyard wrestling federation. And I got involved because I had the mats, so I got to be in it. And now they didn't have to bump on the ground. They were actually safe. And the dude Warren that got me in, allegedly his dad did jobs for like WCW or something. So he used to train us. And it was really weird. We would train at this Kung Fu dojo. And there was like 2 big puffy mats where we would learn how to bump, and I'd practice my moonsault because of course I moonsaulted before I ever learned how to do a tie-up or take a fucking headlock. So yeah, that's how I ended up breaking in. Then one of the guys I met through all that, I went over his house one day and I saw a business card on his refrigerator that said VCW Wrestling, which is still in existence today, by the way. And it had the promoter's name. I asked him if I could keep the card. He said no, it's his only copy, but I wrote it down on a piece of paper. Called the promoter the next day, and he invited me out to a show. I set up rings at his shows for several months. I'd go with my buddies. They'd throw me some bones, and a couple of the guys would step in the ring and train with me. So I kind of like weaseled my way into wrestling, and then ended up actually going to a wrestling school and getting on the scene, and then getting fine-tuned by Rip Rogers and Marty Jones. So yeah, technically that guy Warren, my brother's friend from middle school, is the one that got me into the business almost. But I would have found my way in one way or another. But yeah, that was the origins, man. That's how it all began. Very humble beginnings.
Well, I think we got to know now, going back to, if it's the backyard or what it sounds like, it was like the originators of the bar wrestling that we see today. What was the gimmick? What was the persona that you had going on?
El Sucio. So it was like a joke lucha thing. We actually turned into a legitimate promotion. Everyone got trained, and we would use good indie talents. And man, we were like, if this was out today, it would be one of the most over brands in wrestling. Get on YouTube sometime, Rick. I know you'll dig it, man. Just look up Richmond Lucha Libre. Once we started knowing what we were doing, we were having turn-away shows, man. Like, we just had like this edgy, adult-oriented, witty, kind of irreverent show. With a lot of good high spots, some good wrestlers, and it was like the cool thing to do in town. And all of that started as a joke in an apartment. Then when I became part of it, came the wrestling mats. When I met this guy that let me come to set up his rings, I decided for our first show, I was like, hey, I'm going to rent this guy's ring. So I rented a ring. We had our first show. Then we got organized. Everyone got trained, and then we started running. But yeah, man, we used to outdraw the minor league baseball team, the Richmond baseball team.
Wow, that's a hell of a pool then, especially as popular as you've got minor league baseball down through that area there. But perfect transition here. You're talking about, yourself making that move to OVW. Back in the day, as we're talking about, that transition between attitude to ruthless aggression, there was a period where I was turned off to WWE, but I still needed that pro wrestling fix. So I turned to the indies, and growing up here in Southern Ohio around the Cincinnati area, we were blessed. We had weekend television that included OVW, Heartland Wrestling Association, and even the Northern Wrestling Federation. So I had a 3-hour block that I could just, I could sink my teeth into that indie scene. And I'm doing research. When you joined us on the Hameen Media Group platform, I'm thinking back to OVW, and I'm like, why can't I place Chris Silvio? And then it occurred to me that you were that no good bastard, Sucio. I had to make that connect that you were working under a different persona now. But speaking of OVW, it's early on in your career. I mean, you take that cannonball, you dive right into the deep end, start swimming with the big guns there at Ohio Valley Wrestling. I know, we could start talking about talent-wise, a who's who in professional wrestling. But I really want to focus on the training while you were there and the philosophies, the fundamentals, that really were instilled in you that we're seeing that you're now sharing today.
Yeah, man, when you said like walking in with the big guns, I will remember till the day I die the first time I walked into an OVW training session. Keep in mind, at this point in my life, I'm 36. I've been training and weight training, for 15 years or something like that. But when I first got to OVW, I had just started lifting weights. I wasn't very big. And on the indie scene where I came from, you didn't have monsters walking around. I remember just walking into that first training session, and these guys just seemed like dinosaurs to me. They were just so damn big. I was like one of the 3 smallest guys there. So it was really hard. Talk about having your back against the wall, man. That's one of the things I always share with people is like, I wasn't supposed to get anywhere in this industry. Like, it shouldn't have happened, but I was too damn stubborn to go away and too damn smart to not figure out how to do this shit. And thankfully I had a knack for pro wrestling, so I figured it out. But it was hard, man. My first few years at OVW, I had to prove myself. I was a good wrestler as far as the moves go. Like, I could do any move, but I didn't know how to work. I didn't know where to put the moves and why you do them. And that was taught to me from Rip Rogers. And you can explain something to somebody, but pro wrestling is so fucking advanced at a high level that you cannot grasp it in a month. You cannot grasp it in a year. So Rip's telling me all this stuff about psychology and why this was wrong and why that was wrong, but you just can't understand it no matter how hard you try until you've had enough match experience, and then a light bulb will click and you're like, oh, I get it. Then that light bulb will click even bigger 3 years down the line and you're like, fuck, I didn't get it even then, but now I get it. And the process pretty much continues to the day you die. So it was a lot of learning how to work, and it was very intimidating too, because not only was I one of the smaller competitors there, but there were a lot of WWE guys. I'd never met, contracted talent before. Like every once in a while you'd have like Kamala on a show. Barbarian was on a lot of shows where I came from, Beautiful Bobby Eaton, and they were cool, like just relaxed older guys, but you weren't ever around like a bunch of top stars. So, it's a weird environment when you're young. I was 23 and I'm around WWE guys. No one's ever told me how to act, so I had to figure out all this shit on my own. But I got serious about training and I didn't miss a class. I learned from Rip. I did so many fucking jobs before I ever got an opportunity. And I just started training my body. Once I got in the physical shape, that kind of made up for what I didn't have in height. And I got a lot more opportunities and got a lot better at wrestling too.
Yeah, so many that go through OVW, they sing the high praises, and rightfully so. One of the greatest, trainers to ever, to give back to the business of professional wrestling in the Hustler, Rip Rogers. You also there, you have the founder, the owner, then the Nightmare, Danny Davis. I know you were there. You had some interaction with Jim Cornette. I'm assuming you had at least a little bit there with the runs with a Tommy Dreamer and Al Snow, possibly a Paul Heyman.
I worked with Al extensively. I did not get to work with Tommy. He was in talent relations when I got there, but I was in no position to be talking to talent relations then. Susio didn't make much money, so Silvio's the one that made money.
Very, very nice. But all of those very just bold, strong personalities, rich in tradition, that old school mentality. But here they are in OVW, and you think about that, it represents that Southern wrestling, all of those, the pride, the tradition that goes along with that. And you guys, now you have these ties with sports entertainment, the WWE, the over-the-top circus that we're getting from New York. Inside of your training, somebody like Mr. Rogers there, like Rip, how did he, emphasize, okay, this is how you do it. This is how they want you to do it under the sports entertainment umbrella. How did that mesh together?
That's a good question. At OVW, you learn two styles. You learn the traditional Southern style of wrestling, as in he pulled my hair, and the Tennessee tiptoe spot where the tag teamers both in the ring, they're running, baby faces drop down, the heels collide together, pulling a weapon out of your tights, teasing it, putting it back in your tights. Then 10 minutes later, you finally knock the guy out with it. Wrestling, man. You learn Southern style wrestling, but you also learn the WWE style of the day, kind of how they would build their matches, because it was developmental, right, for WWE. So we used the same formula for our matches on the TV shows that they used on Raw, SmackDown, or whatever. And that helped me a lot because even to this day, like when I go anywhere, my work stands out and is different, especially on an indie level, because I learned really early in my career how to work like the stars on TV work. Right or wrong, how good these people are, that varies. But I'm able to put together a really captivating match because I learned this so early on. Rip was bigger on the Southern style and holds and traditional wrestling. You got to remember, man, Rip Rogers traveled the world. He wasn't just a Southern wrestler. Like, he taught us that stuff, but he respected everything, and he really respected shoot wrestling, and that was my background. I started amateur wrestling at 11 and wrestled until I was, I think, 20 or 21. So he would let me incorporate that in. He would just bust your ass, man. Like, we trained ridiculously hard. There were puke buckets outside of the ring that our boy Hameen used every other class. There would just be pools of sweat in and around the ring. He believed more in reps and long training sessions where you're sweating. And he was right, because the more reps you do with something, just like podcasting, the better you get. So by the time we'd done 50,000 arm drags, our arm drag was pretty fucking good,
Speaking of the puke bucket, I've regularly heard the story about how they had like a supersized puke bucket out there with the name Big Show across it when they had to send him back down there to drop some lbs to get back in shape. And that's how intense that the training was. And Rip Rogers, anybody out there listening, do yourself a favor, go look up some of his work over in Japan. I mean, he was an absolute spectacle there. Those audiences loved him. They were in awe of him. And you want to talk about somebody with just that superstar presence about him, especially in Japan. That was Rip Rogers. Yourself, you're talking about working against those larger than life stars. You weren't used to them before you get to OVW. How is it for someone like yourself to make that adjustment? You don't really have that size, and you're talking about you have to work extra hard inside the ring. But I don't, to give you all the credit in the world here, you didn't bring it up. You are a tremendous when it comes to working your persona, the body language, getting your gimmick across, getting that crowd to get excited, to move them. That's got to be something that's instilled in you in OVW. And it's something you don't necessarily see today on the indie scene where, they're more, it seems they're more worried about that floor routine, that dive, getting those spots in instead of really playing to the persona and working that audience. How much did that mean to you? And then how do you pass that on in your teaching?
I agree with you, man. A lot of people on the independent level and sometimes even on the pros, their matches lack emotional investment and emotional connection with the audience. I literally just did a coaching session before I got on the phone with you, and we watched the match, myself and this kid, and that was exactly what I told him. You guys, the match was fine, the moves looked great, but neither of you connected with the audience. I'm a lifelong wrestling fan, and when I say lifelong, it's not like something cute I started watching in first grade. I have watched wrestling as long as I could remember. I have baby pictures of me as an infant or toddler with LJN wrestling figures. That was all I played with as a kid. I didn't like G.I. Joes or anything like that. I've always just liked wrestling. So I didn't realize it, but by watching so much, it had to sink in, right? I was studying it my entire life until I got into it, and then I studied it even harder. So I idolize guys like Bret Hart, who worked those dramatic style matches. I idolize Randy Savage, who had so much personality. So Rob Van Dam, I idolize his moves. Like, those are my dudes getting in. So I tried to kind of be a combination of all that, like RVD's athleticism, Bret Hart's technical ability, Savage's personality, and try to put all that together. But yeah, man, it wasn't easy. And I got to give credit where it's due. Most of this comes from Al Snow. I had to put a lot of the pieces together. But when I started doing Psychedelic Superstar, Chris Silvio, Al Snow really helped me to create that. Cornette was the catalyst. He didn't like, we had a lot of guys with one-word names. He was like, you can't be Susio. You need to have a first name and a last name. So I was like, all right. I went back in the lab. I came up with Silvio. It was similar enough, Chris Silvio. But when Al took over the show, I needed a new presentation because I wasn't getting used. I went away for a while and came up with this gimmick, the Psychedelic Superstar. I came up with the look, the walk. I walked around my apartment for a month straight to the music, figuring out how this dude walks, figuring out his rap, figuring out his swag. Then I thought of what moves I was going to do and where I was going to put them and got it ready. And when I got to the show, I was like, dude, I love it. It's good. But when you get in the ring and the bell rings, you're just a wrestler. And I was gobsmacked. I was like, well, what do you mean? Look at how I look. I was in great shape. My gear was sweet, but he pointed out to me that bell to bell, you don't do anything that fits your character. So every week for a year, after I did it got to the point where it was ridiculous. Let's say I gave somebody a simple snapmare. I would do some kind of pose where I flexed up my bicep or do some kind of silly mannerism and then went to something else. Literally after everything. But that taught me how to stop just the physical stuff and connect with people. Then once I got good at that shit, I learned how to make it dramatic, and I learned when to do it and not to do it every time, not to do it too big. But Al never told me what to do. He never gave me a single idea for my character. He just told me what I needed to do with who I saw was inside of myself. So I gotta credit Al for that.
It seems like it's something that you hear so regularly that's missing, especially, on a level of WWE in today's scene, is instead of inspiring and leading, it's more of the dictatorship and, really putting their thumb on you to say, no, this has to be this way. But they give you the freedom, and that's when you're going to create and truly be a part of that persona, bring that to life. Let's switch gears here a little bit. In the open, I mentioned this deep resume that you have and all the roles that you've been able to have your hand inside the business. Now, when it comes to pro wrestling, obviously the stars shine the brightest in the ring, but there's so many unseen heroes behind the scenes, individuals that are equally, or maybe in some cases more so, they're responsible for the success of a promotion. You talk about if it's camera work or if it's the live event experience, the concessions, merchandise, whatever that might be, something in the office. Can you talk a little bit about why it's important for somebody, so young in the business, especially, to kind of learn or at least understand those different roles?
Yeah, man. A perfect example, my tag team partner who broke in the business with me, James Long. He debuted as the Kamikaze Kid. He performed in OVW as Paradise. He's got an office job. He now is a producer at NXT. He was one of the people behind that great team that made the spectacle that was the Boneyard match. I thought they knocked it out of the park. They did so great. And he started as a wrestler just like me, same place, but he had a talent for art and harnessed that. Through his career, he'd make flyers for people. Then he started doing the videos at OVW. Lo and behold, he's got a job. It's important to learn every aspect because this shit doesn't last forever, and you never know when your body's going to go. Like, I was happy that I got, 18 years just about with my body, and who knows, maybe one day I'll be fit to go again. I don't know. That's not for me to determine, but I do know that you can't do this forever. So if you want to stay involved and have longevity, you got to learn other aspects. I've literally done every single job you can do in pro wrestling with the exception of refereeing. I don't know why, it just never came up. I always had long hair. You don't see too many long hair referees, so that could have been it. But I've literally done every job. So that's why now I know how to do it all. I got a job as a producer a couple years ago for the SIW company in Italy that I'm helping to build Italian wrestling. And I timed so many shows and produced and written shows at OVW that I knew exactly what needed to be done. I would write their whole TV, I'd book the angles, I'd time it, and it's flawless. And when I put on my indie shows here in Florida, the boys are always amazed because I have a run sheet. I have the exact times I want them to go. I have a producer there telling them minute by minute what they need to do. So all the boys are like, man, usually there's just like a fucking piece of paper on the wall and everybody goes 10 minutes over. But I wanted to learn every job because I love wrestling and I want to be doing it always. So I got to keep myself relevant and learn everything that I can. And to sum it all up, it's important for anybody that wants to get in this industry to learn as much as they can about everything. If you know how to cook in a restaurant, but you don't know how the management runs of a restaurant and you open your own, you're going to be at a deficit. Wrestling's the same way. Learn it all. Every part is valuable. That's why we shake each other's hands when we walk into a building and when we leave. From the ticket taker to the main eventer, you show respect because every single person makes this thing come together. We can't do one without the other. This show, we got a producer mixing it. I wouldn't be a guest talking about these cool things if it wasn't for the people producing it. Wrestling is the same way, man. The unsung heroes, they get respect from the boys, but the audience a lot of times has no idea who they are.
I guess a good plug here for OVW to stay on that cutting edge, to keep evolving with the game, and what Mr. Snow and Mr. Beckham have done down there to take it to that next level, that becoming accredited for a school. That they're not just going to teach you the bumps now and the ins and outs of running the ropes. They've got a full-blown production down there. They're teaching exactly what you talked about. So it has got to be a premier destination, for anybody looking to break into professional wrestling. Exciting things going on down there, continue to go on for OVW. But so you've got some exciting projects of your own going on right now. And I got to be 100% honest here. And I think it's pure brilliance and it's innovation at its finest. Of course, I'm talking about the coaching collective that you've got going on with Chris Silvio, Superstar Seminars. I know you're still doing the traditional, we'll call it the brick and mortar on-site seminar styles, but this newer concept you've got of taking it directly to the people, going online, presenting these different situations, these different style training seminars, absolutely brilliant, my friend. What was it that inspired you to move in this direction?
Thanks, man. I've always enjoyed coaching, and I found many years ago that for whatever reason, I was blessed with the ability to motivate people and get people to follow. And I had the ability to explain step by step how to do things. I coached amateur wrestling and I coached pro wrestling from a very young age. So it was just always a skill that I found out I had. It's like a kid that never played baseball, but the first time he goes to practice, he hits a home run. Like, I was just born with the ability to connect with people in that way. Now, if we're at a party, it's the complete opposite. Like, I don't want to talk in a room full of 50 people. But if it's wrestling that I know better than anything, I could literally teach this to anybody. So it's a skill that I have. And, seminars got pretty popular, and I wanted to do more. As an indie wrestler, man, you don't make that much money for your matches. You got to figure stuff out. And once I got more TV time and stuff, I could ask for more money. But I needed more streams of revenue. I needed merch revenue coming in. I needed, my seminars, my coaching revenue. So I just wanted to make mine different. When I started doing seminars, I didn't call them seminars. I called them workshops. I would have people dress in business attire when they came to my workshop with a pen and paper or a computer to take notes. And I would have a lecture for 90 minutes. Then we get in the ring and we do physical shit. So my stuff was different right off the bat. And I worked in corporate America for quite a while. So I started thinking, like, I had to take a webinar, like, when they first came out for work, and it was in the back of my mind. But one day I was just thinking of something else I could do. And I'm like, man, every other industry utilizes this type of technology except for pro wrestling. And I thought I could really make it big. So I held the very first ever pro wrestling webinar about a year ago. Since that time, I've done several. Now I'm doing weekly webinars with the group of coaches in a program called the Coaching Collective. Basically, when all this COVID-19 shit hit, I wanted to figure out a means to get training to people that are going to be at home. Like, I wanted them to keep having the ability to learn and talk to and learn from good people that know what they're doing. So I cut the cost all the way down to $10 from $30 just to make it affordable to people that, are struggling right now. I get it. And I decided I was going to do them weekly with a different coach from around the world. So this week we're doing a wrestling and a referee class. Everybody listening to the show, that already passed, but you can purchase a replay if you'd like to see that. But no, coming up on April 18th, I'm doing a commentary webinar that I know a lot of the brothers in podcasting are attending. And that's going to be hosted by myself and Brent Tearing, OVW commentated at All In, MCW, and one of the most talented dudes in the world. So I just decided to put together different things and be different than everybody and care. I think that's the main thing that separates Superstar Seminars and me as a brand and human being is I care. I don't want to go out there and do something shitty and then have my reputation being, oh, well, Silvio's a shitty coach or he's just trying to get people's money. Because a lot of seminars get a bad rap. This dude that was on TV in the 90s charges $50 for a seminar, shows you how to do a headlock and tells you rat stories and rib stories for the rest of the time. Fuck that, man. Like it gets me hot even thinking about it. I work too damn hard on mine because I want those kids or men or women to leave being like, holy shit, I opened up a new door today. Like when I first grasped Rip Psychology or Al's character acting, like, that epiphany. And I want that for other people. And I just have too strong of a work ethic. Like I couldn't phone it in if I wanted to. I'm a different cat, man. What can I say? I do shit differently.
Well, let's look real quick at this team, this coaching collective you put together. I mean, this is like the 90s Bulls right here, this team that you put together. You got Rudy Gonzalez, who's the head trainer at the TWA. Oh yeah, that little promotion in school that was Shawn Michaels. They co-started this thing together. HBK gets all the credit for the Daniel Bryans and all that, but it was Mr. Gonzalez that really drove all the stars we've seen come out of there, Daniel Bryan included. You got Matt Sydal, WWE, Ring of Honor, Impact, New Japan, absolute global star, household name in professional wrestling. You got Josh Jerry, head trainer at AMLW out of North Carolina. Joseph Connors from NXT UK. Nick Beckham, as I mentioned before, he's down there with Gladiator Sports and OVW. You got Aaron Goose Mahoney, a tremendous referee. I think he just, as we're recording, that's coming up here in the past. You can go ahead and get that replay. And the one you had mentioned, I'm looking forward to. You've got Timmy Baltimore. You guys are going to be helping us out. The commentators, the color guys, the play-by-play. I've been fortunate enough the last 2 years. I've been working for a number of promotions here in Southern Ohio area, hell, throughout the Ohio area, and I've modeled a lot of my work. I have studied so much of Mr. Baltimore's work going forward, so it's something I'm absolutely looking forward to. And I think we're talking about that innovation and cutting edge, going outside the box. You don't see this elsewhere, where you're focusing in on the referees and the commentators, and bringing in those other aspects that help the show go on. One of the things that really jumped out is these talking points, if you will, these hot spots that you're hitting when you go through all these seminars, the core fundamentals, the ring psychology, the business etiquette, the getting booked, staying booked, the training, exercise, effective communication. And as you were talking about earlier, which really jumps out to me, is the personalized persona workshop. I mean, this entire thing, this is like the Harvard of pro wrestling seminars.
Yeah, I think OVW would claim gimmick infringement. I know they used to call themselves the Harvard of pro wrestling. But no, man, I appreciate the kind words. I just try to make it good and try to make it different. Kind of diversifying the referees and stuff like that. I would hear referees, they've been reaching out to me for years for advice. And I know what referees should do, but I've never been one. So I always directed them to Chris Sharp, very talented referee who's also a good worker, a guy that I trained that's now at WWE NXT UK. I would always direct people to him, and I'd give them advice about the business. And if they asked me technical ref questions, I'd say, well, go talk to Sharp. He's the man. But refs would always ask me, like, are there going to be any ref training sessions? And I realized pretty much nobody has them. So I decided I was going to partner up with great refs that have been successful, not some dude, just at the Charleston Civic Center once every 3 months. I wanted pros that have been to the dance so they could teach these guys exactly what to do. And it's just another moving part. I realized I was leaving out commentators, and it was another hole in the market. Nobody in wrestling's taking the time to work with the announcers and the commentators. And I got news for you. The most important people in the match are the commentators calling the match and the referee keeping the match together. If you don't have those two moving parts, if they're bad, no matter how good your match is, it's going to suck. So I just wanted to fill that hole in the marketplace and put two of my friends on. I honestly, man, I'm not just saying it because he's my friend. Of everyone I know personally, Brent has the best mind for wrestling of every person I know in pro wrestling. I won't say in the world because there's people I haven't met, but I ask him about, he's my consultant on anything. It could be like, should I use this guy on my show, all the way up to a huge life-changing career decision. First person I go to is Brent. He knows his shit, man.
You hear so many stories of, the office would send certain individuals, scouts, management style, down to OVW. And when they'd come back, they'd ask them, what did you think of the talent that you saw there? And they would put over Mr. Baltimore as one of the best, if it be in the color or the play-by-play position that they had ever heard. So much praise and respect towards him there. Beyond the seminars here, as if the virtual seminars weren't enough of an incredible learning experience, Mr. Silvio, you've also recently launched your own Patreon service, which can be found at patreon.com/Superstar Wrestling Network. Two very affordable memberships, offering just some unmatched content. Why don't you go ahead and put over this Patreon thing you got going on for the listeners?
Yeah, man. That's something I brainstormed talking to Nick Beckham one day. Just like how we had the referees and the commentators in mind, I realized I was doing all this cool shit for the people in wrestling, and I was leaving the fans out. So I'm like, man, I got to come up with something that I can give to the fans the same way I give my energy and my knowledge to the boys and girls in wrestling. I was big into podcasting from 2014 to about 2017. I had my own show, the Chris Silvio Show. I had a lot of really great guests like Jim Cornette, Rip Rogers, people from Impact, people from WWE, just a lot of people. And I got busy going on the road and stopped podcasting and didn't get back into it until recently. So I decided I was going to, start up my own podcasting network, produce multiple weekly shows, videos, funny clips, do interviews. As you can tell, based on this interview, I'm a different cat and a pretty interesting person. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I come up with some really cool and funny different shows that you're literally not going to see anywhere else. And some cool watch-alongs and guests and stuff like that. So yeah, I urge you guys to check it out. I guarantee you I'll bust my ass to give you a great product. I'll give you an assurance on that. And it's only $4.99 a month. That's like a Starbucks, Frappo, latte, mocha, bullshit, whatever. $4.99 a month. I do have a top guys package if you want to be over. $10 a month. And for that one, you get some merch and you get the ability to guest co-host every month a podcast with me. And some other cool shit. So yeah, check it out, man. Patreon.com/Superstar Wrestling Network, named after yours truly. It's going to be awesome. And thank you really to everyone that's already signed up. If you haven't, just sign up. You want
you say, all the content there, very affordable, especially in these times. And hell, even when we get back to the familiarity in life, when you're on the go, so much content to take with you. It sure as hell sounds, and I'm sure it smells way better than, to say that shit that Tesla's been spewing out on her Patreon. So go check it out. Go check it out. It's Chris Silvio's Patreon. You make sure you hit that up. Mr. Silvio, I want to thank you for the time. Thank you for the incredible insight. On top of the Patreon, can you please let everyone out there know where they can keep up with you across social media with all the awesome happenings you got going on, any other pods, broadcasts? Where can they keep up with you?
Yeah, man, I got too much shit for me to keep up with. But if you want to attempt, I'm on the social medias at the Chris Silvio. I'm on Facebook at Chris Silvio, and my business page is Chris Silvio's Superstar Seminars. So check that out for any upcoming webinars, training sessions, fan events, anything like that. My new podcasting network is pretty awesome, and it's going to get even better. Just go to the link we told you, patreon.com/Superstar Wrestling Network. I started a YouTube channel as well under the name Superstar Wrestling Network. We're showing some clips from some of the content that you will see on Patreon, but you ain't getting the full thing, guys. So yeah, it's only $4.99, so help your brother out. But yeah, that's where you can get a hold of me, man, and I will be trying to keep my sanity and hanging out with my beautiful girlfriend, Jenna Van Muscles, and creating awesome, dope wrestling content.
Before you go, I need to point out one thing. You forgot to mention one very important social media outlet where they can keep up with everything you got going on. As I was preparing for this conversation, I stumbled upon this. It's still very active. It's myspace.com/totally awesome tag team.
Oh, shit.
You guys are still active over there. And what really popped me, you go to the MySpace page, and right there on your top friends list is a link to one Mr. Ben Hameen. Have you guys been holding out on us? You guys been kind of moonlighting over on MySpace still?
We have been, yeah. We're actually very over on MySpace. More so than Hameen, but still.
Very nice, very nice. Once again, thank you, Mr. Silvio. We'll let you get out of here. And for your listeners, we'll catch you back on the other side right here with the Hot Tag WrestleCast.